Have you ever wondered why exactly you lose at chess? I have wondered that about myself a million times, and I've always wanted to have someone that tells me, Anna, this is the reason you lose. Stop doing this and you'll win. So, today, everybody, I will be that person to you. I'm going to be playing one rapid game, or maybe two if it goes very fast, and I will be telling you exactly where it is that my opponent is going wrong. Hopefully you learned something about this video, and if you do, don't forget to like and subscribe as it really does help the channel. Guys, let's go right into the first game. Okay, everybody, so I am right now playing from my speedrun account a 10-minute game against this 1100 player. They are going e4 and I'm gonna go c5. Now you may wonder, Anna, why does it say that you're 1096? Well, the reason why it says that is because this is my speedrun account. It's an authorized by chess.com account that I use for speedruns and for educational purposes. All my opponents get their rating back after playing with me. But my normal rating for everyone that is new here is around 2100. That is my real rating. So, d4, I'm going to go ahead and take on d4. Now, in this position, you typically want to do something like c3 or go knight f3 to capture back with the pawn, because if you capture back with the queen immediately, then I'll be able to go knight c6 and I'll be able to attack the queen and gain a tempo, which is what is called in chess when you basically gain a move for free. So, knight f3, I will go ahead and attack this pawn. I'm going to see where this pawn goes. So far so good. We will see what my opponent does to save it. Typically, probably my opponent should advance the pawn. And then I'll just go knight d5, and this will be maybe transposed into something close to an Alapin, which is a famous chess opening. So we're playing 10-minute games without any increment, which means that when the time is done, it's done. But it still gives us enough time to think and to really talk about every single one of the moves. So I'm going knight d5 just to put the knight right in the center of the board. If I would go anywhere else, my knight would just not have as much movement. Now the queen is taking over here. This, I would say, is a mistake. I would say that you have to take with the knight, at least typically, because now, like I said before, the queen is going to be in a really awkward position. So my next move is going to be knight c6 just to defend, just to attack the queen. And with my knight on c6, I will also gain a 10-point development. I want to develop my knights and bishops before I develop my queen and my rooks. So I am basically able to develop one of my minor pieces for free, which is awesome. So now the queen has to go back to d1, and my knight is a little bit under attack because this bishop is threatening it. Now, it is true that I could take it back with my pawn, but then the queen will take it back, and I will lose a whole pawn, and we don't want that. So I will go ahead and go knight b6 and attack the bishop and see where the bishop goes. Now in this position, my opponent is going bishop g5. Wow. So this is a move that is basically saying, you know what, I'll let you take the bishop, but if you take it, I'll take your queen. So my opponent is threatening my queen right now. I need to do something about it. Of course, that was a mosquito that was just on top of my nose. But there's always an issue, or not always, but a lot of times there's an issue when you try to overcomplicate things. So the thing is that now I'm gaining another move. I need to move my queen, that's true, but I'll go ahead and put it right here on c7. And now I am both attacking the bishop and I'm also threatening this pawn on e5 with two different pieces. It's going to be really hard, pretty much impossible for my opponent to defend both things at the same time. It's at least going to be really hard. I think there is one move right here that does save the position, but it's not an easy move to see. So I typically recommend people to just go for the simplest moves. In the sense that if, you know, especially if you're lower rated, if an opponent is attacking your piece, defend it, move it, do whatever, but don't, you know, attack another one of your opponent's pieces, because what's going to happen then is that they might get a free tempo, just like I did. And I think that I just got a mosquito bite. So the only move that I think was working before, well, I'll tell you right after this game, but let me know down in the comments down below if you see the move. So now I will go ahead and take this pawn. It is a free pawn and free stuff is very affordable. So I'll take it, and okay, I'm seeing right now that my opponent has decided to not take back. Typically in chess, they say that you want to try to keep a bishop pair, because if you have a bishop pair, then you'll be able to cover squares of all different kinds of colors. So I will take this bishop instead of taking the knight. The bishop was also looking a little bit towards h7, which was a little bit scary to me. Now I'm going to go d5, the idea being that I want to put this bishop on d6, but I don't want to do it in this position because then I'm going to be blocking my d-pawn, which I don't really want. So I'll go d5 first. Now I want to go bishop d6, but my opponent does have the threat of going knight b5, and I'm not a fan of that. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to defend from that threat at the same time as I am developing a piece. Like I said, guys, developing your minor pieces, aka the bishops and the knights, is awesome. That's what you want to do in chess. So I will go bishop d7 just to stop the knight from coming in. Now, my opponent is being very tricky. What they're doing with this move is that they're putting the rook in the same file as my king. What happens then is that if I am not very careful, I might lose something here because this pawn is right now actually under attack. Knight takes pawn is a threat because if I take it back, the queen can take it back and I cannot capture it back because of my king. So I need to figure out a way of defending this. Now I have a few different ways of doing it. I'm not sure I have any that I'm really happy about, but I'll go bishop c6 to simply defend the pawn. I think those are really good move what my opponent just did actually. But I do am a pawn up right now, so I do am a happy woman. So yeah, now the issue with going bishop here though is that maybe my opponent can bring up some knights. For instance, knight over there, that's a really good move, but my bishop over here is actually a really bad piece because all of my pawns are in light squares. This bishop is also light squared bishop, which means that my pawns are blocking the bishop, which means that my bishop is basically a pawn. I mean, the bishops thrive when they're in open diagonals, but this bishop is not in an open diagonal. This bishop is actually just blocked. So I don't care about the bishop. If they want to take it, they can take it. I will now go ahead and castle and mind my own business. Now, if knight takes bishop, because my opponent put their bishop on the same diagonal as my stuff, I'll be able to take their bishop. So I don't really think that bishop f4 was such a good move. Okay, let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and see. Let's go ahead and see. What will my opponent do now? I am threatening at this point in time f6, forcing the knight to move, and then I'll be able to take this bishop. So I do have some of my own threats. So, okay. The knight goes up over here. All right. So, I'll go ahead and exchange my bishop. I mean, I would rather exchange this bishop than my dark squared bishop. And this move, I don't think it was that bad, but it does hang another pawn. The question is, do I want to take the other pawn? I think so. I'm seeing a free pawn on c2. Sometimes you don't want to take free pawns because they might give your opponent a little bit too much activity. And I think that my opponent should go for this, but I do think that they should have prepared it before they went knight b5. I think that they did this move without seeing that they were blundering a pawn in the process. It's always important to see, you know, if I move a piece, what piece am I leaving behind? How does the position change when I move my piece? You know, and especially when you're, oh, I'm not going to pre-move that. Another thing you should not do, don't pre-move, especially in rapid games. That was a terrible pre-move. I've lost my queen. No, I'm not pre-moving that. I'm an expert at pre-moving in longer games, but I shall not pre-move and lose my queen here. But yeah, now that my opponent is 2 pawns down, they really need to find a way of trying to get some compensation for it. This actually was a pretty good way. No, actually, this just blunders. No, actually, I was seeing some ghosts. But yeah, so knight d7, the idea is that after I take this bishop, they want to take the rook. But the thing is that getting 2 minor pieces, which is what I will get after this. Oh, they didn't even take the rook. Yeah, I just got a free piece. But 2 minor pieces are typically worth more than a rook because at the end of the day, a rook is all alone. 2 pieces can do more stuff, especially if they coordinate, but they can also take different roles in the chess game. So typically we say that a bishop and a knight is better than 1 rook. Okay, so I will go ahead and take this back. I'm not sure if maybe their plan was to get the pawn back, but they did lose a piece in the process. So far what I'm seeing in the game is that the biggest issue of my opponent has been that they are blundering some pawns and blundering some pieces, but they are playing in a pretty creative way. So queen c6, because I am up so much material now, I am up a piece and a pawn. I want to exchange queens because every single endgame I will win. Yeah, it's pretty much the way it is. When you're up material, you want to exchange as many pieces as possible because the endgames are winning. Now my opponent is doing the right thing by not wanting to exchange. You need this queen because the only way that my opponent can win in a position like this is by checkmating me. Like, as sad as it sounds, if my opponent doesn't checkmate me, they're probably going to lose the game because all endgames are winning because I just have more material than them at the end of the game. And, you know, if I exchange everything, there's only a king left. The king can't do anything. So I'm going to go ahead and go e5 because I want to start pushing my pawns. I want to get as much center as possible, which is these 4 squares. And what I want to do is that I also want to attack the queen in the process. I want to say, okay, you know what, opponent? Where are you going to go? And unfortunately, my opponent blunders the queen by going queen e4, and now I could just take the queen. But my opponent resigned before I even was able to take the queen. I think the biggest mistake that my opponent did was giving me free material in the opening and letting me get a really nice position. For instance, after I attacked the bishop, my opponent had to just move the bishop and go back to d3. And then if I attacked the pawn, they could go bishop f4, and then they would be developing at the same time as they're defending their pieces. But instead they went bishop g5, and now their bishop is under attack, so I could get the pawn. And then they just let me get this really nice and comfortable position. All right, guys, we're going to go for one more game, okay? We're going to go for one more game. Now, if you're asking why I got 126 points of rating in this game, it's simply because I don't play any rapid in this account. So, my game just got aborted. All right, we're going to go for one more game. I will be explaining every move once again. So, d4, d5, I'm playing right now against the 1200. I'm going to go c4. This is the queen's gambit. I'm gambiting this pawn. I'm giving them a pawn, but if they take it, I'll be getting some nice, beautiful center. So it is a gambit because you get some compensation for the pawn. So I'm going to be developing my knight. So far, so good. This is called a Slav, a very normal chess opening. I'll go ahead and develop my other knight. I like getting my knights out very early on. Now the bishop is going to g4. This is typically not a very common move in this position because now I can go knight e5 and I'm threatening this bishop. I mean, this is not a bad move in any single way, but now you probably have to go bishop h5 to make this good, which is what they're doing actually. So actually this is probably completely fine. It looked a little bit funny to me at first, but it's probably completely fine. What I'm going to do though is that I'm going to go ahead and take this pawn on d5 because this bishop is not in this diagonal anymore. I think that now I may be able to attack this pawn a little bit more. So I'm going to go queen b3, and now I am attacking this pawn on b7. Now their idea of going bishop g4 is just simply that they want to stop me from going e3 and developing my bishop as my queen is with them be pinned. But now I got my queen out of the pin. I can go I can go e3 very soon, and I'll be going bishop b5 check. Just to really try to exploit these light squares. You can see in this position now after b6, which I don't know if they had to go b6. I'm wondering if maybe it would have been better to go for some more tactical stuff. Maybe there wasn't anything. But this has definitely gone wrong now that b6 has been played, because now the light squares are super, super weak. So I'm going to go e3. I'm going to get my light squared bishop out. And you guys are going to see how weak these light squares actually are without the bishop in this diagonal saving them. My bishop is going to go to b5. I'm also looking towards this pawn on d5. I think that the only move that my opponent has right now is e6 to defend this pawn, because otherwise bishop b5 check is coming and then I'll be able to win this pawn. So I'm just trying to focus on what exactly my next moves are going to be. Another thing that is really good to remember, and actually let me know in the comments down below if you guys are right now watching this part of the video and listening to this, because the biggest tip that I can give you guys when it comes to calculating in chess is to always calculating every single check, capture, and attack. This is known to be a really good formula for calculating in chess. Now, the way that you do it is that you simply say, okay, what checks do I have? And in this position, I have a few different checks. I have 1 check, I have 2 checks, and I have 3 checks. Now, bishop b5 check just loses a piece, so it's terrible. Queen b5 check loses a queen, so it's even worse. And queen a4 check is a move that I can analyze, okay? And this will be the first move that I analyze. Now, after queen a4 check, the question is, what does my opponent do? My opponent needs to cover up with this check. And what I am realizing is that after queen a4 check, this rook is not defended, so there is a pin going on. So this pawn will not be able to move because I'll be able to take the rook. So I like this check, okay? So this is the first thing that comes to mind. I like the check. I'm going to write it down in my mind. I want to go queen a4 check. Now, the next thing that comes to mind is captures, okay? So captures is another really important thing in chess. Always calculating what captures do you have in the position. I have this capture, okay? This one is terrible. This one is terrible too. This one is terrible too. All of these just lose a piece. All right, none of them. Okay, an attack. What attacks do I have? You know, can I attack a piece? Do I have any fork? Attacks are a great way of calculating what forks you have in the game. Okay, I don't have any good attack. Okay, I'll go for the check that I wanted to do at first because I do think that this is a good check. So I'm checking the king, and now the idea is that if my opponent goes something like knight d7, my plan is to go bishop b5 and attack. Right? And the way that I'm attacking is because the pawn cannot take back because the rook is hanging and I'm threatening to take the knight. Now, my opponent is not realizing this. They're not realizing that this pawn is actually pinned. So I'll be able to go bishop takes b5 check immediately now. And now if the pawn takes back, I will take the rook over here and I will gain an exchange. Once again, always calculating checks, captures, and attacks. Now, they're not taking back because they realized the issue with taking back. So I need to re-evaluate how I want to do this. So now my bishop actually is under attack, so I gotta be a little bit careful. So let's go ahead and start with the checks. I have this check and there's also a capture. Let's see, is this any good? Let me calculate it. So takes and takes, and then I can take this pawn. So I do get a free pawn by doing that. So that is good. I could also go bishop c6 and attack the rook. That could be one attack in this position. But then I don't really know how to continue. So I'm going to go ahead and take this one. The queen cannot take back because then I can just take back with the knight. And then I'll take on d5. Now, I would say that so far, the biggest issue that my opponent, or the biggest mistake that my opponent has done has been to not realize how weak the light squares are. It's been a positional understanding failure that they haven't understood that them leaving the light squares like this, putting the bishop on the other side of the board, and leaving the light squares like this have created catastrophical consequences, which is what we're seeing on the board right now. So I'm going to go ahead and attack the queen because I don't really know where the queen is going to go. The queen does not really have a lot of good squares to go to. I do think that e6 was a pretty good move. Oh, I also just realized that I blundered. I mean, I didn't blunder, but I could win a rook. So I literally just realized it now after I made my move. I was so excited. Guys, this is what happens when you don't follow check, captures, and attacks, okay? I went for an attack before I went for a capture. I should have calculated the captures because after this, there's a fork on b6, winning a rook. I didn't calculate it. I just thought about the attacks first, and now this happened. So I don't think that this is a bad move, but I did have a better move at hand. This is what happens when you don't go for the very famous method of checks, captures, and attacks. So now, though, my opponent went queen g5, and now I do have another way of winning the rook. But it's not just winning the rook, it is also a checkmate. And just like that, there is a checkmate on the board. Plus 106 points of rating, but obviously my opponent will be getting the rating back. They probably don't know that they're playing as a 2100 rated opponent. So that's, yeah, I'm sorry, Santiago, but you'll get it back. You'll get it back. Once again, guys, taking care of your light squares. I don't think that bishop g4 is so good because after this whole thing, takes and takes, I do think that I'm able to get some really, I think that I'm able to really attack the light squares in a really good way. So I wouldn't really recommend this opening to begin with. But yeah, takes and takes and queen b3. And in this position, I think that the only move that my opponent had was to go queen b6. Just because in this position, at least, you know, exchanging queens is probably the best that there is. I mean, if I exchange queens, yes, this pawn might get a little bit weak. I can take, and then maybe go knight b5. But, you know, that is still better than the positional the positional issue of going b6. I think that this move, which is what happened in the game, I think that a lot of people wouldn't really see how big of an issue it is. But it definitely became a really big issue, as you guys can see in the game. Now, I could maybe even have gone, instead of for e3, I could have gone for e4 perhaps, putting some pressure on this pawn. But I went for e3, and in this position, my opponent went a6, which was you know, probably like the best thing that they could do at this point, but now this is already a lost position because of these light squares. This bishop is not developed, the king needs to castle, and yeah, the light squares just basically lose the game. In this position, b5 was also a blunder. You had, my opponent had to go knight fd7. Really important to take this, I think knight fd7, because if knight bd7, I think that maybe knight c6 could have been an issue, but perhaps not. But yeah, knight fd7, the issue though becomes that I can take on d5, so I can't take this pawn. But if knight d7 over here, oh yeah, then the issue is that there's bishop takes a6. But anyways, these were some ways of defending. It was definitely important to go knight f or b d7 instead of going b5, as then there was just this miss. I think my opponent just missed that the rook is hanging, and then after this, yeah, it all kind of went down a bit. Anyways, guys, I do hope that you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching. Once again, don't forget to like and subscribe and turn the bell notifications on. Boing! Yes, I don't know the sound that they make. But guys, I'll see you all in the next video. Have a wonderful day. Goodbye.